resume, and I highly recommend you look through all the accomplishments. He started advocating for drug law years and years ago, and he will tell you about that. He's got quite a few things. He's written his book, Why Our Drug Laws Have Failed, a judicial indictment. You know, what an interesting perspective to get it from the judge's view. I saw this documentary. I don't know how many of you saw that documentary, American Drug War, the Last White Hope. That was good. And, of course, he's comparing cannabis and production and consumption similarly to wine. What a California thing to do. We'll want him to talk about that. And I gotta say, he is an author and composer of the musical Americans All. So he may break out into song and dance at some point in this presentation. Yes. We're hoping for that. Would you please welcome the very distinguished Judge James Gray.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We want to talk about what you want to talk about, and I don't expect that Rob Kampia and I have to convert anybody into the understanding that what I say, the war on drugs is the biggest failed policy in the history of the United States of America, second only to slavery. And I'll go and talk with Rotary clubs, and I begin with that, and then I launch into it and I prove it. I will further go on and say that regardless of what your interests are, I can show you to your satisfaction how your issue is made worse because of our policy of drug prohibition, and I believe that too. But we don't really need to get into that so much. What Ken says is true. As a former JAG military attorney, former federal prosecutor, and then a judge for 25 years, it just became abundantly clear to me that we were churning low-level drug offenders through the system for no good purpose whatsoever, ruining people's lives. I've never used any form of illicit substance, although when cannabis eventually is made legal in California or wherever I might be, I probably would try it, particularly maybe some of the edibles, whatever. But I am convinced, absolutely convinced, and you hear story after story after tear-led story, that the most harmful thing about marijuana is jail, is a conviction. And shame on us for all of this. And by the way, it is kind of a question of liberty, where I talk to folks and say, you know, the government has as much right to control what I as an adult put into my body as it does what I put into my mind. It's none of their business. So we're making progress, and the libertarians should take credit for what has happened in Colorado, what has happened in the state of Washington, what's very likely going to happen in the state of Oregon, the state of Alaska this election. They will probably make recreational marijuana legal like it should be. In California, I feel comfortable that we will pass an initiative in 2016, basically regulate marijuana like wine, etc. Throughout my involvement, and in 1992, I came out publicly as a sitting trial court judge, held a press conference, a somewhat unusual thing to do for a sitting judge, stating our nation's drug policy is not working. And it's amazing the experience, the journey that has been since then. Some of the best people I've ever met in my life are as a result of my involvement in drug policy reform. One of them is sitting right here behind me, a fellow by the name of Rob Kampia, who, if I have your story straight, and I'm sure you'll correct me if not, Penn State, was it, where he went to school? I think valedictorian, was well on his way, and then had a marijuana arrest and conviction. So he has devoted himself, basically his life, to something called Marijuana Policy Project, MPP, easily one of the most stalwart organizations you could ever find. This man, when the history is written on this whole subject of drug policy reform, will have a chapter unto himself. So I'm proud to say that Rob Kampia is my friend and just simply a solid American, patriotic American, and very effective. So when we're talking about this issue, I love to ask questions. And it's non-combative. It isn't like, what's the matter with you? Wake up. You know, that doesn't work.
No.
But if you ask questions, it does. And the question I would ask, and I ask you, you know, how many people here feel the federal government has all the answers? Okay, and it'll get a chuckle, and people then start real. Well, okay, so if I'm in Nebraska or Arkansas or wherever I happen to be, how many of you believe that you as adults in Oklahoma or Vermont have perfect ability to decide how best to regulate, control, and serve your people with regard to the marijuana issue? And people will raise their hands. Okay, now you have adopted the concept of federalism. Now that sounds kind of egghead and stuff. No, our country was founded on the concept of federalism, to allow each state as a laboratory of democracy to figure out how best to serve and protect its people. So if the federal government doesn't have all the answers, then you ask this question, which I commend to you in your dinner table conversation, or if you're talking to Rotary clubs or whatever, ask the question, how many of you believe that we in the United States of America are in better shape today than we were 5 years ago with regard to this critical issue of drug abuse and all of the crime and misery that goes with it? Nobody will raise their hands. What's the first realization after you come to that conclusion? We have no legitimate expectation of being in better shape next year than we're in today, unless we change our approach. Fair enough? So then people will nod their heads just like you are. And it doesn't matter the group. It could be a political group, a religious group, Chamber of Commerce, whatever. We all realize what we're doing isn't working. And it's not going to get better unless we change our approach. So now what should we do? Well, it seems to me that we ought to stop being so myopic, take our blinders off, and look and see what's happened in our country for the last 5, 10, 50, 100 years that has worked and not worked. And what an amazing idea. Let's adopt programs that work. And jail hasn't worked. We were talking about this earlier. He's from Huntsville, Texas. You can go into any jail or prison you want to in our country. And drugs are fully available in our prisons. Costs more, but they're fully available. And I was saying earlier, I was speaking in Orange County, California to a real conservative Republican group. There happened to be 3 prison wardens in the audience. And I made that comment. You can get all the drugs you want in prison. It just costs more money. And one of them laughed and said, well, you can't get all you want. So, okay. So if you can't keep drugs out of prison, for heaven's sake, how do you expect to keep them off the streets of your towns and cities around the country? So people are beginning to get it. Those radical founders of our country, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, raised hemp. And on frequent occasions, I'm told, they sit out on their porch and smoke hemp. You know what the first laws were, regulations were in the colonies with regard to this entire issue? Depending upon the size of your colony, you were required to raise so much hemp in your community. It was a viable product. What are we doing? It's still a viable product. I don't know, how many of you know Trader Joe's restaurant, markets and stuff? Yeah. Those radical organizations. You can get hemp seed granola at Trader Joe's. Really nutritious, tastes pretty good, all that sort of stuff. We can trade in hemp all the time, and we do. Huge product, but we can't raise it. We have to import it from those radical countries called Canada and England and stuff like that. We are punishing our own farmers, our own manufacturers, our own people by this ridiculous set of laws. We're on our way. We're on our way, as well we should be. And when it comes down to it, you all know who Robert Downey Jr. is. Very effective and really quite an actor, doing real well. Pretty much lifelong heroin addicted person. And he better be careful. As I understand it, he's doing well now, but he'll always have that craving. He better be careful. But it makes as much sense to me to put Robert Downey Jr. in jail for his heroin problem as it would have Betty Ford in jail for her alcohol problem. It's the same thing, isn't it? It's a medical issue. People don't so much get addicted to marijuana, but let's concede that maybe they can. I don't know. But it's a medical issue. Why push people farther away from the medical professionals that can help them instead of bringing them closer and assisting them? But if Robert Downey Jr., Betty Ford, you or I drive a motor vehicle impaired by, you fill in the blank, methamphetamines, marijuana, alcohol, my drug of choice, cocaine, whatever, that's a crime. What's the difference? Now, by their actions, they're putting our safety at risk. Legitimate criminal justice issue. But we have strayed from that. In the whole criminal justice system in our country, we have strayed away from that. We're trying to protect people from themselves instead of from other people. It doesn't work. It's clogged our system. It's caused untold untold problems in our country. So the secret is, you don't have to make drugs illegal in order to have the problem users come into the court system. They will come into the court system on their own actions. I am proud to say that within 6 months of when I was appointed to the bench back in the end of 1983, I put in the first drug court, as far as I understand it, in the country with regard to alcohol-related offenses, because it hit me between the eyes that the biggest non-addressed issue in our municipal courts was alcohol-related offenses. You know, we'd bring them in there, we'd growl at them, we'd say, well, don't do it again, we'd take their money and kick them out the door. And they were going to be a recidivist, because if they're an alcoholic, they're going to drink one drink, they'll drink 6, they'll drink 10, and then they'll go drive a car, because of course I'm not inebriated. But if you take them into the system, use me as that ogre in the black robe, saying, you know, if you even ingest any alcohol and I find out about it, I'm going to put you in jail, which I did for short periods of time. And you can really use the court system to assist in the problem users. And it's the same thing with regard to these other drugs as well. And if you are causing other people danger and you are harming other people, then you use the court system and the drug courts to address those problems. But the other people, let them alone. You or I, as long as we're over 21 years of age, could go home tonight if we wanted to and drink 10 martinis, right? Not smart, certainly medically not healthy, but not a violation of law, nor should it be. Why is it any different with regard to these other drugs? Why? So this is what we are doing. Liberty is expanding. Some common sense is occurring. Restorative justice is the way to go. Hold people accountable for their actions, not what they put into their bodies. We want to leave time for questions, so I can go on almost without taking a breath for 3 hours on these things and go through lots and lots of different things. Rob has his own approach with regard to this. Marijuana will be regulated and controlled in this country soon. In fact, I'm here to tell you that in my view, that proverbial light at the end of the tunnel is now in view with regard to what happened in Colorado and the state of Washington in 2012. So it's going to happen, and I guarantee you or anyone else that will listen, probably by the end of 2016, marijuana prohibition in our country will be almost a thing of the past. Hooray for that. And then within 2 years thereafter, everybody in the country, virtually, will put their arms around each other and look back and be aghast and astonished that we could have perpetuated such a failed system for so long. Libertarians, take credit for this. And then if it worked here, hey, maybe it'll work somewhere else too. On the campaign trail, and I was proud to be your representative as the vice presidential candidate with Governor Gary Johnson, who is, in my view, clearly was and is the most qualified person to be president I know of. But I didn't talk about drug prohibition very much. I'd always get asked about it, wouldn't back away from it. I don't want the Libertarians to be seen as a one-issue candidate, or in fact, if you say, well, aren't you a one-issue candidate? I say, yes, in fact, we are, absolutely. Our issue is we want to bring back prosperity, equal opportunity, and liberty to the United States of America. That's our issue. But drug policy is just one of those. It's a big one, and it's one that is impressive and important. Take credit for it. Stand up and take a bow for it. And then let's move on to financial responsibility, social acceptance, and all of these various other things. So these are things that libertarians stand for. We are on the ascent. If we cannot be on the ascent in the community and with problems in the environment like we're facing today, we might as well fold our tents and go home. But people are understanding this, and we should now put real pedal to the metals as such and get these libertarian candidates elected around the nation. That's what I stand for, and if I can help in any fashion, I travel a fair amount, and I will do my best to do that. But with regard to marijuana, with regard to drug policy reform, we're on our way. And one of the reasons we're on our way so much is the fellow, again, sitting right behind me, Rob Kampia, the head of Marijuana Policy Project. He's going to take a little while to He's really organized, you know, PowerPoints and all the rest of that sort of stuff. But he has a lot to talk about, and then we're anxious to take your questions too. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being libertarians. Let's spread this word. And here is my friend Rob Kampia.